Welcome back to the VET S.O.S podcast. Whew. Can y'all believe this is going to be episode 200? 200 here on the VET S.O.S podcast. Remember, you do not have to drown in the sea of transition. Grab that VET S.O.S lifeline. This is... Anna, nobody could take this away from you. Being part of you on episode 200. That is a huge milestone for us here at the VET S.O.S Podcast Network. And we're going to be sitting down with Anna Larson, founder of MilSpouse Transition, host of 3 podcasts, and powerful spouse advocate. This episode is all about our spouses. Can't wait to jump into this. But before we jump into this, I'm filling in for my man Sean because he's out there doing some great things, working on his tan, drinking his Starbucks coffee.
He's hanging out with Eric Brew, and I heard slacking. Both of them are slacking.
Yeah. So
we're just gonna hang out and let you two hold down the fort while we're
Don't worry,
out.
me and Keith gonna hold it down. We out here. He got his brew, I got my brew. And Laura got her brew. We're gonna have a great time.
There we go.
But before I start, how you doing today, brother?
I'm hanging in there. You know what? I'm living the dream. It's a good day. So it's good to be here as always in the bicentennial episode 200. I don't even remember what number we were on when I came on, but this is an amazing milestone. So, I'm honored to be able to be a part of it and super excited for the discussion we're going to be having today with Anna. So
great. Anna is a small business marketing strategist and founder of MilSpouse Transition, where she helps military spouses. I'm so nervous. It's the 200 episode. I'm like, man, please get it right. Don't mess it up. And here I go, right? Military spouse through the transition out of active duty life. She's a Gallup certified coach focusing on well-being, and she hosts 3 podcasts as an ambassador of veteran spouses for 5 and Thrive, and advocates for improved military family quality of life. Her work has been featured in a number of publications. When she's not behind the mic or in a marketing strategy session, Anna enjoys exploring the outdoors with her family, soaking up the sun with a good book, and chasing adventures wherever they may lead. How you doing today, Anna?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on. And I'm honored to be on the 200th episode of VET S.O.S podcast. That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's been such a blessing to be able to keep the show going and people find value in it for it to stay alive this long. So hopefully there's the 200 more down the road. So, really excited and looking forward to this conversation today. So, but before we kind of get into the MilSpouse transition and even the podcast, you can probably teach us a few things about podcasts that we're screwing up right now. But all that to say, kind of tell us a little bit about, I guess, your transition, but also just how you got into this space.
Yeah, well, it's all kind of one and the same, Keith. Honestly, I started MilSpouse Transition because of our transition out of active duty military life. It was in a way to say it, it was not a great experience, and not for myself, not for my service member. And so from that produced this idea of, I said, there has got to be a better way to support military families as they move through this. And there's lots of things out there for the service member. Not all of them are fantastic. Not all of them work for everybody, but I couldn't find anything that supported the family or the spouse side of it. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, as military spouses do, if it's not there, we're just going to build it. And so that's kind of what I did. But our transition happened, in 2021. So it was right at the height of COVID, which was a little bit of an issue in and of itself. But it was kind of one of those things where it was very sudden. My spouse, my service member, he just came home and he said, I think I'm done putting my boots on. I think I'm done. And I was like, no. Number one, we're at Fort Hood, and you promised me at least one more duty station. And
get me out of Killeen.
Yeah, I'm like, this is not the plan. But just because of the way the service, like the time in service was happening during COVID, it just was, I think it was really, really hard. And so he just said, yeah, no, I think this is it. So we transitioned out in 10 months. And it was, it was one of those things where we had talked about plans for so long, and then when reality hit, it did not fit all those plans we had made through the years, and I realized really how unprepared I was. And then honestly, for myself, if we're talking about transition from the military spouse side, and this kind of ties into why MilSpouse Transition was even created, is I didn't realize how much I left myself and my kids out of the equation when it came to planning for transition. So we got his CIF gear turned in. We did all the things. We went through that massive checklist that the military had given him. We made sure that he hit all the milestones he had to, that he was going to the VA, that he was doing this and that. But we completely left ourselves out of the equation. And when he went in to go pick up his DD 214 on that last day, which happened to be April 1st, and I kind of find that to be humorous just in and of itself. um, because it was COVID, no ceremony, nothing like that, right? There was nothing like that going on. He put a mask on over his full beard he had already grown, and to hide it, and went into headquarters to pick up 2 manila envelopes, one for him and one for me. And as I watched him driving away, I had this moment of just panic where the question that went through my head was, can I still go to the on-post library? Which is a ridiculous question. There's libraries all over the town we live in. I mean, really, but that question was symbolic of how unprepared I felt and how many questions I had left. And I realized as he was driving away, we were out of time. Like this was it. He was going to pick up his paperwork, and barring some this is an April Fool's joke kind of situation, we were done. And I was super unprepared for that and had a little bit of what you might call a meltdown, breakdown of just wait, come back, wait, I'm not ready for this yet. And then that was kind of our transition story. And then I mean, it's been 5 years, and I would say that we're doing okay, but there is still a struggle because of how much I realize now I did not know about what transition truly does for the service member, but also for the spouse and the kids and just the family in general, if there is one. So that's my story.
Yeah, and a powerful one, right? Like especially this show in general, like we concentrate so much on the service members transition and their journey, and so many times the family gets a little left behind, a little forgotten about, right? Isn't focused on nearly as much. I think about my family when I came out. Uh, wasn't as bad, only because my wife, like, that she's the one of the reasons I did retire, because they were trying to PCS me one last time, and I said, "No, I'm done. My wife has an amazing job here. I'm not uprooting her, and I don't wanna be a geobat ever again." Like, I've spent plenty of time away from my family. I don't wanna do that anymore. So it was time, right? That was like my marker. I'm like, "I'm done," because I don't wanna uproot them anymore. But it was still so taxing. So I can't even imagine, yeah, when you just having those question marks over your head. So powerful, powerful journey. So how did MilSpouse, I mean, we got the why. Let's talk about the how. How did it come to be, and what's it doing?
Well, I actually, like, I love telling stories, right? So I'm in the pool with my fellow military spouse who's also a veteran, and we were talking about it, and she had transitioned out as a veteran. And now she was looking at a second transition now as a military spouse. And we were kind of talking through this process. And I said, I didn't realize how hard it was going to be, right? I didn't realize how wrapped up my identity was in the service that my spouse had. I didn't realize how much I relied. I thought that I was fairly independent. I mean, we've been doing this for decades, right? So I thought I'm independent. I have a job. I've worked at our entire military career, so I was very fortunate in always being able to have a profession, like, all these things that in my mind separated me from really being dependent on the military. But what I realized is that I actually had more dependency than I thought. And I was more institutionalized than I realized when it came to understanding how the civilian world worked now. And so anyhow, we were sitting in the pool and we're talking about it, and we were talking about what would we change if we could do it again. Her as both a transitioning veteran and me as a transitioning spouse. And we came up with a pretty darn good list. And I said, why don't we just build this? Why don't we create something that helps spouses understand what that process is going to look like? At the very least, to give them, I mean, no journey is going to be the same. There's not going to be a step by step, do this and your transition will be fantastic. It's going to be different across the board, but at least to help them better understand what they're going to be facing, the kinds of things they might run into with their service member that they're not thinking about, because that was a big one for me. And then also how to prepare themselves mentally and emotionally for the identity crisis, the loss of community, all those same things that we talk about service members having. And we do the conversation is happening now a little bit more, but that spouses are also going through that same loss because we've lived in that same community. We rely on that same level of identity of I'm a military spouse. And then when you become one, when you leave the military, especially as a veteran spouse, you're literally nothing. I mean, active duty spouses have some status, but when it comes to being a veteran spouse and they say, oh, spouses are welcome, you have to ask a second question. Wait, are you talking active duty or also spouses of veterans? Because for all purposes in the eyes of the DoD, I am just a pure civilian. I have nothing to do with the military anymore. And yet I spent 2 decades of my life living that life right alongside my service member, and that was really difficult for me. So that's how MilSpouse Transition started, in a pool. I'm gonna, if I'm being honest, with strawberry wine
Oh, so we weren't
in
doing
hand.
laps. We were lapping of a different. Yeah, no, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. What thoughts you got there, Kings? I can see the gears
Uh,
turning.
Right. So, Anna, when you was in there, you was in the pool, have your strawberry wine, and he's like, "Yeah, let's start this." What made you say, "Let's call it MilSpouse Transition"? Because I just learned it's over 70. What is Keeps over
I
72,000? Yeah, it's a
yeah,
lot.
we learned a new
It's a
number
lot
today.
of
Yeah.
organizations out there. But you said, I want to create this space right here for the military spouse that's in that that gets forgotten about, or that's, that always there for the service member, but for your transition as a military spouse to transition along with them, because the military spouse also has their lane of transition as well, right? Because you still have to take care of the house, and then you still have to figure out if y'all gonna relocate, and now you're looking at, okay, where we gonna live, where we gonna stay, while the service member is figuring out what gear to turn in, what what paperwork they have to fill out, how to transition their health care to the VA, and that's stressful right there. So when you said, let's do this MilSpouse Transition nonprofit or organization.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that really what it came down to was I started as an idea of as a Gallup coach, right? I'm big on really being self aware, understanding yourself, knowing how you can thrive in times of challenge and difficulty. And so that's just kind of ingrained in kind of who I am, just generally, and my professional side. And so when I started to think about military spouses exiting and my own personal story and how that happened, I thought, you know, if I could help spouses really start to think about that process of the deeper introspective, who I am and what do I really need to be happy? Because when you live an active duty military life, you don't got all the choice. You don't make all the choices, right? It doesn't matter if you don't like living here, you're here. Welcome to whatever duty base your service member's been assigned to, right? You can't just, I mean, you could just up and leave, but now you're breaking your family apart, which is yet another difficult conversation and difficult situation to be in. Then you've got the career conversation. As the 24% unemployment rate with spouses that's been consistent for decades. And so all these programs that are supposed to be helping, but we're not seeing changes in numbers. We're not seeing a huge difference in how many spouses are finding meaningful employment. And I mean, if you start to go through the areas of well-being that I really focus on, it's also community oriented, and loneliness and anxiety and depression is higher in military spouses than any other female, usually female. I'm going to, categorize that with 92%, I think, of spouses are female, but that that those mental health things are more serious in military spouses than they are in other communities where you're looking at that kind of thing. So there's this there's this understanding already that active duty military life can be stressful, strainful, and difficult to live. And now you're getting ready to leave it, and you think in your head, these the golden ticket, right? I get to make all the choices. I can choose what I'm going to do, but we forget alongside all those great positive things that we're so excited about, still come massive changes and choices. So, now you're looking at a change in career for your spouse. And if you're not working or don't have a steady job or a profession that is going to maintain a family level of living salary wise, there's financial stress that comes with it. Finding a new location. Are we only going wherever my spouse can get a job? Right? Or are we truly going to be able to go back to those locations we've talked about that we love, that bring us joy? And what about our kids who need maybe special services? Like, so all these questions that start happening, they get wrapped up in the transition conversation. And so when I started MilSpouse Transition, I thought, maybe we just start with ask these questions. So the very first document I put out was like a spouse transition timeline. And the first 5 pages are literally questions that they should have answers to, or at least be thinking about and talking to their service member about. Because one thing I learned is that what I thought was going to happen was not what he thought was going to happen. And so it wasn't until we started having that conversation that I'm like, oh, wait, you want to what? I always thought we were doing this. And when you only have 10 months of transition time like we did, it was too late to start having those conversations. So it's things like, hey, start asking these questions. And then that turned into, well, if we're going to ask questions, we need to know the answers. What resources are out there? And then I quickly realized there's a lot of resources out there, but they do not cater to spouses. They're if they do, they don't say anything, and you have to ask, I'm sorry, can you support spouses too? And that's a question that every military spouse hates asking over and over again, right? Hey, we help the military community. Wait, just the service member or the spouse too? And so it was me kind of starting to vet organizations and saying, hey, what do you do specifically for spouses? Where can they participate in what you're offering? So I created this resource hub. And then last year, we piloted a workshop that's a 1-day workshop where we kind of go through. We use the Clifton Strengths assessment test, but we do the assessment test. We really dig into that, who I am, the way I thrive, where I get my energy from as a human being. And then we translated that. The second part of the workshop translates into how do we take those strengths that I now know about myself and apply them to community, my personal relationship with my spouse and children, my physical health and mental health, my financial situation, and how I have a relationship with money, and looking towards like retirement and what that actually means for my family. And then also career goals, if they have them, or if their career goal is to be a stay-at-home parent, or to go back to school, or continue being a volunteer, which so many spouses do, and it's not to have a full-time job. And that's another thing that I think a lot of spouses, there's just so many things that if you don't start having those question or conversations with your service member, you're going to quickly fall into a panic mode where you just think we'll take care of it later, and then later becomes too late. Because once you're out of the service, those resources available to active duty spouses are gone. Like the day they're gone. You can't go back, and you can't take advantage of some of those education plans that are available for active duty spouses. You can't do some of those things, and you think, oh, I'll do it later. And then later becomes too late for a military spouse. and they end up falling into that pattern that I'm going to use the word complain about when they were active duty, which is I always have to put my dreams aside. I can't wait till retirement comes, and then retirement happens and you're like, I'm still putting my dreams aside because now the resources are no longer available to me. And that's kind of how MilSpouse Transition started. Like, I just started to build. We've only been in existence for a year and a half at this point. So we have a thriving website. I've got a ton of resources and downloads that are on there. We piloted the 2 workshops, and this next year is all about building out that workshop program and giving spouses something tangible they can do to support their transition process. And then also starting that partnership, like a true partnership with different organizations, saying, how do you help spouses? How can you help them through this process? Let's actually create something where, I can tell spouses, this organization will help you do this. And there's a lot of career focused ones, but when it comes to the other areas of well-being that I look at, there's not as much available. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to over this next year.
That's yeah. There's you threw out so many truth bombs out there. Like so much. Yeah, you hit everything on the head, and like even that number, right? Like part of my day job is military spouse advocacy for employment within my organization that I work in, and they are military spouses are the single most unemployed or underemployed demographic in the country, hands down. Like nobody even comes close. And so, yeah, when you think about that, and then you add transition into there where they are likely only uh, relying on one source income, and then those questions, do we need that second source? Is the service member going to be able to find employment because we typically take pay cuts when we get out of the military, at least initially.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, what's that going to look like financially for the family? I mean, there's so much stress there. Um, I guess the question I have to all that is, there's even as King's mentioned a little bit ago, right? There's anywhere between 40 and 70,000 some nonprofits in the military space, right? And they're not all created equal, right? And there's a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot maybe, but there's a fair amount of bad advice out there and noise and things getting jumbled up in the mix. So if you could ban one piece of a terrible advice that spouses are constantly given about, career and purpose or, be flexible, all that kind of stuff, what piece of advice would be going in the shredder?
that, that is such a fun question. I have like 20 that just popped into my head. But
Okay.
if I
Well, give us 5 then. Yeah.
yeah. I think if I had to, uh, I think if I had to go back to my young self and say, hey, put this in the shredder, it's that this is a hard one because sometimes you can't do this, but it is stop putting yourself second to everything that's happening. Like, find a way to be able to do both what you need for yourself, but also what service requires of your family. And I think that's really one of the big ones. So in terms of career, I had a very unicorn profession opportunity. I was hired remotely in 2003, and I kept that job for 16 years through every PCS move, and that was almost unheard of. Same company, but what people don't realize when they hear that, though, is that while I did work for the same company, and every time we went overseas, they would put me on an extended leave of absence for 2 to 3 years, and when I came back, they would slot me back into a contract position with whatever contracts they were working on at that time. But what people don't realize is I had no professional progression truly. Like, I stalled out at where I was because you can't progress professionally, even in 16 years time, very far when you have to take a 3-year sabbatical because you're living in Germany, or a 2-year sabbatical while you're in Africa, or whatever location you're in that they're sending you. And so even little things like that, where I felt very fortunate that felt very fortunate I had a job. And for a long time, I thought that had to be enough. And when I realized the older I got and the more experience I got, and then after transition also is that it's okay to want more. And maybe that's the advice. Like, that's not the advice I'd put in the shredder. That's the advice I would give. And instead of putting yourself second, is it's okay to want more and to shoot for more and to ask for more. You don't have to be satisfied with what everybody says. Hey, that's what you get simply because you're a military spouse. That's the only way, in my mind, that we're going to start to see change happen for spouses in those critical areas of mental health and career and finance.
And yeah, sound advice. And I got one more question that we'll ask later on. I don't have time for it right now. And we're
Okay.
actually getting late in time. The time has flown. And we haven't even talked about the podcast. So we may have to bring you back on, but I want to at least, you'll maybe episode. Well, I don't want to wait till 300, but yeah, we'll bring you back on. But I just want to at least make sure we mention them. So tell us a little bit about the 3 podcasts that you're also managing as well.
Yeah. So one of them is actually a small business podcast that I do with my fractional CMO partner, Selena. And we do a small business podcast for entrepreneurs, small businesses, and it's marketing and best practices. And basically, we bring on experts who come on and talk about what they do best and how that can apply then to doing things better as a business owner. That's the first one. The other one is MilSpouse Transition Conversations. And it is similar to this in that I bring on people and resources that have stories to tell about how they can support military spouses. And that one I started it as a contract thing for an organization that wanted to talk to spouses more. And then when that contract ended, I said, you know what? I've really enjoyed this. I feel like there is a place for spouse voices to tell stories about just living their military life. And then because I focus on transition, it turned into that. And so that's what MilSpouse Transition Conversation is. And then we're launching this year Mandatory Fun Talk, which is which is a spouse to spouse conversation about transition. And it is spouses speaking to each other about some of those questions that we ask, like, the idea of healthcare is a really good one, right? And just being able to say, how do you pick a doctor when you've always had a doctor just said, here's your PCM is who you get, and there you go. And what are you really looking for? And kind of those humorous life fumbles that come with living in the civilian world when you've spent decades not living in the civilian world and you don't realize how different it can truly be. So that's Mandatory Fun Talk, and that's going to launch this year. I'm excited about it.
That's yeah. I love that third one especially. I think that's going to be a hot podcast, and it just made me even think like, again, some of us were blessed enough to retire. So there's still healthcare, like the healthcare thing you just touched on. I'm like, that's a whole other episode in and of itself. Cause for MilSpouses, especially because, if you don't retire, as the veteran you might get some VA stuff, but the rest of the family, it's like, you got to figure out what we're going to do if for healthcare
Yeah.
needs and stuff. So that, oh my goodness, that's a whole nother can of worms. Kings,
I'm happy to talk about all those things anytime you want, Keith. You
exactly.
just
Yeah,
let
no,
me
we
know.
definitely got to bring you back on. We'll definitely, when Sean's done sipping his Mai Tais with Eric Brew and hanging out and doing whatever, we'll definitely have you get rescheduled for another episode. But I've been hijacking. I feel like Kings, what you got, man? I know you got thoughts over there before we wrap this up.
Yeah. So, Anna, right before we wrap up, I just want to for the listeners, has there been more mill spouses that you have helped that has been in the retirement space, like Keith said, or the ones who's done 1 to 2 tours, right? Because I know that's totally 2 different avenues, right? Because you have one that has the healthcare kind of attached to it, but then the ones who just do 1 or 2 tours and they living on base, right? So now they have to find a whole new, place to relocate to. Like, oh, so you saying I can't stay on base? Like, no, like once the time is up, you gotta you got to go. And then all that starts to trickle down, like, where are we going to go? How are we going to eat? Especially if you don't have that retirement income coming in. And you're
Yeah.
waiting for your VA compensation to thing, and that takes a long time. And then now you have the military spouse that hasn't been employed because they're home supporting the household, and now that extra stress is coming to a farmer, that panic, right? That anxiety. So my question is, how would you share with some of our young transitioning military, in their 20s or early 30s, that do not have that runway, as Keith said, that have that long stretch to kind of take off. They just have to hit it and pull up, and then we'll figure it out. So definitely your organization, how has it helped out that section of the MilSpouse community?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kings. And so for because I did retire, our family did retire out. That is my personal experience. And so what I've done is I have a volunteer team of 5 people that work on this organization, and two of them are younger spouses. One that med boarded out, one that ETS'd out with their spouse. That after 8 to 10 year kind of service timeframes. And so I rely heavily on them to be able to kind of help me better understand what that process was for them. But one of the things I would say is that first, our site is not built for just the retiring spouse. And the questions that are being asked are the same questions for a younger spouse that is not retiring, but ETSing in some way or med boarding out in some way. But also, I'm just going to throw one more category in here that you haven't mentioned, but divorcing spouses, same exact thing. And so that site has been built for those groups, and we're working on National Guard and Reserve, and then we're also working on Gold Star spouses and kind of having a space for them as well over the next year. But to answer your question, I would say you still have to be talking about retirement from the very beginning. One of the pieces of advice you hear is start talking about retiring out or transitioning out the day you enter the military world. And I would say that is absolutely true. Like this should be part of a bigger picture plan, not just the what we're doing now and then fly by the seat of your pants, especially when you have a family involved. And so it's about making sure you're talking with your spouse about what expectations are there. How, do they want to stay in or do they want to get out? What does this look like? And sometimes you don't know the answers to that, which is why you have to keep having the conversations. You can't just have it once and say, you said in 2017 that you were going to do this. Now, as a
Yes.
married person, I know that happens. It's not me. So that's the advice I would give is that it doesn't matter if you're retiring out or if you're transitioning as an ETS. You have to be having those conversations and asking questions and creating a plan for your future, or you're going to fumble through it the same as everyone else. And ETSing out is more difficult. You do have to have more conversations about healthcare and living arrangements and jobs. There's not as many fallbacks as there are for retiring and families. And, I can't even imagine how scary that can be for some of these families that where they're leaving, departing, and their time is up and there is no job on the horizon and what that, kind of the fear. So we do have places on our site that talk specifically about healthcare options that they have. And a lot of this is gleaned from the TRICARE websites and the things that are already out there in the military, but we've compiled it into one place so that hopefully it's a little bit easier to navigate for them as opposed to having to research it on their own through 10 different websites and then try and understand what the VA is actually saying about what healthcare is available. I mean, that VA speak is its own language sometimes. So I love the head
100%.
nods, both of you.
Oh
Yes.
yeah, 100%. Well, we are at time, and Anna, this has been an amazing show. We can bring you on for like 3 or 4. Like we could do an episode for each category of military spouse that you just rattled out. I mean, guard, reserve, ETS, divorce, retiring. Yeah, because each one is. I mean, each transition is unique, but each of those categories they have their own struggles
There,
and
yeah,
things to
absolutely.
consider. So yeah, I'm gonna have tell Sean to bring you back on for like 5 more episodes. We can just do a whole month of
Would
we can do
love
military.
to.
Actually, that would be great. When is it? Military Family Month is April or May? Like we
It is
should do like a whole
yeah.
month. Hey, there's an idea.
MilSpouse
Maybe
Day is in May, and the month of the military child is April. So yeah.
So
Yep.
yeah, maybe I can talk to Sean about that. But no, it was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for everything you're doing for this community. But before we go, I do have one last question, which is for all the military spouses out there listening, and or if you're a service member in transition, you're like, my wife is stressing out, like, so I want to tell her where to go. How can they get in touch with you? How can they sign up for the services? And or somebody wants to support, how can they do that?
Yeah, the best way is to head to our website, which is milspouse and on there, you can kind of see the different areas of well being. If you're interested in having that Clifton Strengths Assessment test, it's on there as well, a way to get in touch with me personally about that. But we also have on our contact page is a collaboration form. So anyone that has a resource for spouses that they would like to have shared out there, I would love to hear from you, right? Because I am not the expert on all things. I am a good organizer and a detailed person that likes to put stuff together, but I do not want to be the expert on finances. I do not want to be the expert on healthcare. I don't want to do that. I know that there are way smarter people out there, and 72,000 organizations focus on some of those categories that I just want to be that the combiner of information for people. So I would love it if they would sign up on that collaboration form, and they can always send me a note through the website is the best way to find me. And then also me personally, LinkedIn is where I like to hang out and spend some time on LinkedIn, but that's where you
That's
can find
awesome.
me.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So y'all heard it for our male spouses listening who feel stuck, resentful, or maybe even a little guilty of both. Yeah, that's your first step right there. Go to milspouse and get signed up for those services. Absolutely. And we want to thank everybody for joining us today, the entire VET S.O.S family. It's always great having you along for the ride. Don't forget to check out all of our other shows and episodes and keep coming back for more stories, insight, and support from the VET S.O.S crew. And if you enjoyed this episode, give us a follow, share the show, and tell a friend or two. Toss your battle buddies, fire team, shipmates, and wingmen that flotation device they need in transition so no one drowns in the sea of transition. And as always, grab the VET SOS Lifeline.